Chapter 2. Wading into the pool. Once I decided to commit to the process, the question was, which one? What service? Which country? Ukrainian women and Ukrainian culture appealed to me more than some other lands and their women. A foreign affair, AFA, seemed to be the best overall value, offering Ukrainian romance tours for about $3,400 versus some of the others around $5,000. They also offered individual tours at $800 and even have something called an individual introduction where a customer can pay per date. The cost is $150 for use of the office and $75 for each date. So essentially the first date would cost $250 and each date thereafter would be around $75. AFA was hands down the most affordable I found with the most options. It seemed to me that a romance tour was the best way to go. The potential to meet 500 women over a 7-day period just can't be beat. If for some reason you don't know what a romance tour is, the host company like AFA will arrange a social every couple of days for about a week. Each social is kind of like a party where the ratio of women to men is at least 10 to 1. If there are 20 guys in the tour, a minimum of 200 women will be at each social. Usually before anyone decides what tours he will go on, the man will fill out a profile like any other normal dating site. Then check a few boxes as to what countries they would like to receive letters from, and voila, you've made your first crucial mistake. Here is the most important golden nugget of all. Do not read letters. Do not write letters. Why? Because each letter is $7 to $8 to open, but then the girls send pictures at $3 to $4 per picture, so it can run $30 to $40 to read and respond to one letter. We'll eventually explore this topic in more detail, but let me turn all the cards over now and just say letter writing does not work. Once you crack that first letter open, you enter the twilight zone. Smoking hot young women are writing me? It's a feeling of euphoria like drugs. When I first started receiving letters, I felt like a rich, powerful sheik who could look out his window and know the world was his for the taking. Dozens of beautiful women were writing me every week from all over the world, some sending 2 and 3 letters with the subject in the heading, "Please respond. I am real woman. I will take care of you." And they will say absolutely anything to get you to commit to more letter writing. I don't care how often AFA says the women do not get paid to write letters. I don't believe it for 1 second. Are some girls legit in the letter writing campaign? Sure. Maybe 1 in 100, maybe. But if you go to a strip club and the stripper sits on your lap and tells you she loves spending time with you, but please buy one more dance, does she mean it? Sure, maybe 1 in 1,000 strippers has genuine feelings for her schmuck. But what if it's true? What if I really found the one now? I asked myself after falling for a smoking hot peasant girl from some town no one's ever heard of somewhere in the interior of Ukraine. Let's call her Tanusha, because that's her name and you're going to want to make a note of it so you can stay the hell away from her. I usually like to make up fake names, but that's her nickname anyway, so whatever. She would send me the most beautiful letters imaginable. For example, one would say, "I can see in your eyes how kind and good you are." And I would think, yes, finally someone sees my kindness and goodness. Another would say, "I know you are my soulmate and we'll be happy together." Holy shit, my soulmate is a 29-year-old smoking hot Ukrainian blonde? I knew it! At this point in time, I had lost my mind. I thought, I already met the girl of my dreams. I simply need to pick her up, and I'll never have to pay for maid or lawn service again. Now, AFA says part of the reason the women prefer to go through the site is for their safety. How giving out a personal email address is dangerous, I have no idea. Although they do say once the women feel comfortable, they can choose to fill out paperwork that allows the exchange of personal emails. So, partly for the book and partly for me, I hung in there to see how long and how much it would take to get that coveted private email address. For those of you wondering if you ever do get it, yes, I did. It was, however, very expensive. How expensive? Hundreds of dollars, and probably more. As stated earlier, just don't do it, don't write, and don't read any emails from any of these sites. It would be cheaper and faster if you genetically harvested your own Russian women before any of these pay-per-scam letters materialized to being anything more than an incredibly expensive dinner, complete with no touching. Subsequently, instead of doing a tour like I had originally planned, I decided to modify a personal trip I had already planned. I was to visit my brother in Germany in May of 2017 with my then 13-year-old son. My thinking at the time was it would be far more cost-effective to simply extend the Germany trip to Ukraine rather than make a separate trip. Obviously, having my son with me adds certain complications, like having a child present when I'm trying to squeeze strange women. Overall, however, I figured it would be a net benefit. Supposedly, there were restrictions with where my girl lived, restrictions imposed by AFA. So I could not buy the single introduction and was forced to spend the $800 on an individual tour. The individual tour provided for 3 introductions per day for 7 days. Of course, I wanted to believe that if Tanusha and I were a match and we were crazy about each other, I would have saved about $2,000 not going on a romance tour. In fairness, however, I also believe in Bigfoot, so we're not talking about much of a stretch to get me to believe in anything. While I was in the moment, sitting in the airplane flying across the ocean, I had no idea if my girl was real. I'll tell you what I did know. I knew I'd exchanged countless emails with her and paid for each one. I knew she had sent me tons of pictures when I paid for them. When I told Tanusha I was coming to visit her, she was very excited. But after about the second email back from her, she said she was going to Dnipro, the city I was to fly into, but not her home, to get some work done in the Dnipro hospital. She said she'd probably be okay by the time we met, but she would not be able to send and receive as many emails as there was no internet in the hospital. Something else rather suspicious to me was that I offered to pay Tanusha for a hotel room of her own in the hotel where I was staying. She told me thank you, but that she would prefer for me to pay for her flat. I didn't really understand that, but okay, I thought. In retrospect, this was just one of many warning signs that she was not serious, but nevertheless chose to ignore. I couldn't understand why she wouldn't want to stay at the same hotel. In my last email from her, she asked if I could pay for her transportation as well. So I get to pay for her transportation, her flat, and she supposedly doesn't have internet. My spidey senses were tingling. Something didn't seem right. I called my contact at AFA and spoke with Vladette. At least that's what we'll call her. A petulant Russian girl who is the point of contact for Americans going abroad. From everything I've ever heard regarding foreign bride scams, the consensus is, if they ask for money, it's a scam. Vladette reassured me that I was expected to pay for transportation and not to worry. It would only be about $30 to $40. I asked Vladette why internet access was so hard to get. Isn't it on her phone? Does she not have a smartphone? I was told the average Ukrainian salary is about $200 to $300 per month, and most Ukrainians could never afford a smartphone. As I write these words, I'm on a follow-up trip to Ukraine. I'm at a coffee house, and even the teenage girl next to me has a smartphone. Everyone out here has a smartphone. How do I process all this information? AFA is obviously and clearly a legitimate business that has been around for over 20 years. At the same time, I was told by them they just partner with smaller local private matchmaking companies, and they cannot guarantee scams won't happen on the other end. At the time, I had provided the local matchmaking company with a backup list of 8 women who live in the area I desired to meet should Tanusha not be available. Out of these 8, I had no idea who would show. Vladette did tell me that Tanusha was very excited to meet me. The journey to meet a Ukrainian takes a lot of faith. My experiences with Tanusha were inconsistent. Many times she didn't respond in a timely manner due to someone cutting the internet cable to her neighborhood building, or she was no longer allowed to use the internet at work, or she was going to a hospital with no internet access, etc. Maybe it's true, maybe it's an excuse. The faith that is required extends to AFA as well. There had been a surprising lack of communication among all parties. Maybe lack of communication isn't the most accurate phrase. Probably the more accurate is lack of communication to make me feel comfortable. So I was on the plane flying to Germany, and it had been a few days since I'd heard from Tanusha, despite my having written her several emails. Nor had I heard from AFA prior to leaving. At the very least, I certainly would have appreciated an email from AFA prior to leaving the States, something like, "We know you are leaving tomorrow for Europe and Ukraine. We want you to know we are ready for you." But again, I tell myself this is why I'm writing this. Hopefully, my book can serve as a companion guide for others to read, should that person go on a similar journey to Ukraine. Somewhere over the Atlantic, I decided to spend the $6 on 1 hour of internet service. And in my inbox was an email from Tanusha. She said she had received all my emails and she couldn't wait to meet. She also asked what my mother thought of my trip to Ukraine, which I thought was sweet. Let me start off by saying I would tell myself all the time, if my number one, Tanusha, is a scam or a bust, it doesn't matter. I'll meet other women, it'll be okay. But when I read that email, I had emotions you can't possibly imagine. So much joy, my mind went straight to, I want her, and only her, and I don't care about meeting anyone else. This was so worth the $1 million I spent on emails to her.